The July sun hung heavy over Asheville that morning, spilling across the red brick streets and the rolling green of the surrounding Blue Ridge Mountains. And everywhere it touched, there was a quiet kind of warmth, the kind that made the town seem smaller than it was. Tourists had already begun to filter in for the Independence Day celebrations. Families with paper hats, dogs on leashes, the occasional teenage couple leaning against the railing of the Riverwalk, laughter bouncing in the humid air. But underneath the sound of fireworks being tested and vendors shouting over their ice cream carts, there was a rhythm to the town only locals could hear. A heartbeat measured in small greetings across familiar storefronts, in the hum of bikes on uneven pavement, in the way the river slipped silently past the wooden docks. Elena Sinclair moved through this rhythm like she belonged to it entirely. At 26, she was as much a part of Asheville as the cafes with mismatched chairs or the murals sprawling across alleyways. Her camera, always slung across her shoulder, was an extension of her body, a lens through which she captured the city she loved. Not just the landmarks, but the quiet moments others never noticed. The way a boy in a baseball cap squinted at a stray kitten on the corner, the way the sunlight pooled in a cracked doorway at noon, or the way her mother's hands trembled slightly when arranging flowers on the kitchen table. Those were her frames, her stories, her life. Her studio sat in a narrow strip of downtown, sandwiched between a vintage record shop and a coffee house that always smelled faintly of cinnamon and roasted beans. The sign above the door read simply, "Sinclair Photography," in bold, clean letters that she had designed herself. Elena was known for her ability to bring people into focus, to make their faces tell a story, even if they said nothing. People from all over the town, teenagers desperate for their senior portraits, couples in love, strangers passing through, sought her out. And she treated them all with the same warmth, the same careful attention, the same smile that seemed to light up even the cloudiest mornings. But today was different. The 4th of July always brought a strange tension, one that mingled with the heat of the sun and the crowding of the streets. There was excitement in the air, yes, but also the faint, almost imperceptible edge of chaos that seemed to ripple beneath the surface of a small town when visitors flooded in. Elena felt it too, though she didn't know why. She shook off the unease as she stepped out of her studio, adjusting the strap of her camera and letting the door swing shut behind her. The town smelled of hot asphalt, barbecue smoke, and distant fireworks. Somewhere, a dog barked, a child cried, and a bus rumbled over the old stone bridge. Her mother, Marjorie, was already busy in the kitchen, humming softly while preparing lunch. She had the kind of presence that drew people in, gentle, steady, a grounding force in Elena's life. But there was also a tendency to worry, to notice things others might not. She watched Elena pause in the doorway for a moment, brushing a strand of hair back from her sun-kissed face, and said, "Don't forget your water, honey. And your phone." "I've got it," Elena replied, offering the kind of smile that always made her mother relax, though Marjorie never quite stopped frowning when Elena left the house. Today, Marjorie didn't notice the subtle tension in her daughter's gaze, the way she paused before locking the door, as if weighing some invisible choice. The streets were alive. Vendors set up their stalls along the Riverwalk, their banners flapping in the light breeze. Children dotted between legs and bicycles. Elena moved among them, camera at the ready, capturing the town she had grown up in but now saw with the clarity of someone who was both inside it and slightly apart. She paused by a corner cafe where the scent of pastries drew her in and ordered an iced coffee, the condensation dripping down the paper cup onto her fingers. She smiled at the barista, a young woman named Carla, and took a seat outside, adjusting her camera beside her as she scrolled through the morning shots she had taken. Each frame was alive, but today her eye caught something off in the background of one of the images. A dark blue truck parked a few feet away, engine off, windows up. It had been there earlier, and now again. She frowned but shook her head. Probably coincidence. Then there was Aaron Clemens. He had approached her twice that week, ostensibly to commission a few landscape shots, but something in the way he looked at her had made Elena uneasy from the beginning. He wasn't someone from her usual circle, quiet, unassuming at first glance, but his presence lingered in a way that felt deliberate. When he approached her outside the cafe, she gave him a polite nod and a small smile. "You're photographing the parade today?" he asked. "Too close, too eager?" "Yes," Elena replied, her voice firm but courteous. "I'll be shooting all day." He smiled. "Maybe I'll see some of your work later." She nodded, turning her attention back to her camera. There was nothing overtly threatening about him, yet the way he lingered, the way his eyes seemed to track her as she left the cafe, left a pit of unease in her stomach. She shook it off. The day was bright, and she had work to do. By mid-afternoon, the town was packed with people. Flags waved from balconies, vendors shouted over the music blasting from speakers, and the scent of fried foods mingled with the smoke of barbecues. Elena moved among the crowd, capturing the moments others didn't see. The nervous glance of a child about to release a balloon, the pride of a veteran watching the parade, the laughter shared between friends. Every shot was a story, every frame a fragment of the life around her. But the edge of tension never fully left her. She noticed the same dark blue truck again, parked at the far side of the street, engine off. This time she snapped a picture of it, though from a distance. Her curiosity piqued. Later that evening, the fireworks preparations began along the riverside. Crowds gathered, settling onto blankets and folding chairs, the hum of excited chatter rising with the sun's descent. Elena climbed a small ridge near the water, setting her camera on a tripod. From there, the whole town unfolded before her lens. Children chasing each other along the promenade, couples holding hands, vendors packing up last-minute items. She framed a perfect shot of the river catching the orange glow of sunset. Then she noticed him again, Aaron, standing near the tree line across the river, watching. Not looking at the fireworks, not talking to anyone, just watching. A shiver went down her spine. She shook it off and focused on her work, pretending he was just another face in the crowd. As darkness fell, Elena's friends gathered her into their group, laughing and chatting about the upcoming fireworks show. The excitement was contagious, pulling at her, pushing the unease to the back of her mind. They joked about who would catch the best firework photograph, who would end up with pepper on their shirt from the food stalls, and who would sneak off to the river for a late swim. By midnight, the crowd was thick, the first bursts of fireworks tearing through the night sky. Elena snapped photo after photo, each frame capturing the glow on children's faces, the reflection on the water, the streaks of light in the heavens. And for a moment, everything felt safe again. She said her goodbyes to the group, insisting she would walk back to her car, parked a short distance away. It was routine, familiar, and she trusted it. As she stepped into the quieter streets near the river, the hum of the party fading behind her, she checked her camera one last time, ensuring the film was secure. That's when she noticed movement out of the corner of her eye, a figure standing in the shadows by the tree line. The denim jacket, dark hair, someone who shouldn't have been there. She froze for a second, heart hammering, but told herself it was just a passerby, just a stranger. She started walking faster toward her car, the sound of her boots on the asphalt sharp in the silence. It was the last time anyone would see Elena Sinclair until the morning when her car sat abandoned near the trail, keys in the ignition, her camera gone, and the world suddenly aware that someone had vanished without a trace. And somewhere, in the shadows that had followed her that night, the first pieces of a story that would consume an entire town, of obsession, mystery, and the desperate search for a girl who had captured everyone's lives, had already begun. The streets of Asheville grew quieter after midnight, though the echoes of laughter and music from the riverside parties still lingered, carried on the humid summer air like a melody that refused to end. Elena Sinclair walked steadily toward her car, her camera bag swinging lightly against her side. She glanced back once at the glow of fireworks, reflecting on the streaks of orange and gold over the river, and for a moment, a sense of calm returned. It was almost over now. The party, the crowd, the day that had seemed so long yet beautiful. She would be home soon. But the air held something unplaceable, a tension she couldn't shake. In the dim light, she thought she saw a figure move along the tree line, just at the edge of the shadows. A stranger, a late-night wanderer. She forced herself to keep walking, telling herself she had imagined it. Her boots clicked against the pavement, a steady rhythm that kept her calm. At the riverside, A few stragglers were still lingering, couples leaning against railings, friends sharing cigarettes, teenagers sprawled on blankets. Elena passed them with a polite nod, pulling her jacket closer against the sudden chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. She felt the weight of her camera against her chest and the rhythm of her own pulse, rapid but controlled. She didn't see him at first, not until she reached the far side of the parking lot. The man from earlier, Aaron Clemens, emerged from the shadows. His denim jacket caught the faint light of the street lamps. His eyes were fixed on her. For a brief second, their gazes met, and something in the way he smiled made her stomach tighten. Not fear exactly, but a premonition, the faint prickling of warning she couldn't name. She averted her eyes and hurried toward her car, hoping he would simply walk past. He didn't. Elena reached her car, unlocked the door, and set down her camera bag on the passenger seat. She glanced around, ensuring she was alone. The streets were empty, the only sounds the occasional car in the distance and the far-off crackle of leftover fireworks. She slid into the driver's seat, her fingers brushing the steering wheel when a shadow fell across the hood. She looked up. He was standing there, calm, almost casual, but there was a deliberate stillness in the way he moved. "Elena," he said softly. Her heart skipped a beat. She didn't answer. "I just want to talk," he added. Something in his tone, too gentle, too precise, made her uneasy. She fumbled for her keys, trying to keep her composure. The night air seemed heavier, thicker somehow, as though the darkness itself had weight. And then, in the blink of an eye, he was closer. Too close. The words he spoke next are unclear to anyone who would later recount the night. Witnesses would remember fragments, memories blurred by shock. But the presence he carried was controlling, suffocating, and for Elena, utterly inescapable. Somewhere in the shadows, the faint sound of laughter from the party seemed miles away. She tried to open the car door fully, but his hand was on it first, steady, refusing her the space to move freely. She gripped her camera, the strap tight around her fingers, ready to use it if needed, though she knew it was mostly symbolic, a small defense against something far larger than herself. And then, she was gone. When the first light of dawn broke over Asheville, the streets were quiet in the way only early mornings in a small town can be. The river shimmered softly under the pink and gold sky. Elena Sinclair's car remained where she had parked it, the doors unlocked, the keys in the ignition, the camera bag absent. No sign of struggle, no indication of where she had gone. Her mother, Marjorie, waited by the phone all morning, calling Elena's cell repeatedly. When there was no answer, she assumed the worst. Maybe the party had gone late, maybe she had gone to a friend's. Hours passed. By late afternoon, the unease had set in fully. "She never misses her shoots," Marjorie muttered to herself, pacing the kitchen. The words hung in the air like a warning. Something was wrong. Detective Lena Ward was the first to arrive at the scene when Marjorie finally called the police. She had been with the department for nearly a decade and had seen her share of missing person reports. Teenagers who had run away, adults with problems at home, wanderers who disappeared for days. But there was something about this case that set her teeth on edge. Elena wasn't a drifter. She had no history of leaving without notice. She was careful, deliberate, precise. A girl who captured life in frames, who documented the world in detail, would not vanish without a trace. Ward inspected the car, noting the position of the keys, the unlocked doors, the empty passenger seat where the camera had rested. Everything suggested sudden departure or sudden coercion. She took photographs, logged the scene, and made careful notes. There were no fingerprints beyond Elena's own. Nothing had been stolen, no personal items missing. Her wallet, her jacket, her shoes, everything accounted for. The implication was chilling. Elena Sinclair had simply disappeared. Witnesses at the party were interviewed, but their memories were fragmented. A group of teenagers recalled seeing her leave with a man. Denim jacket, dark hair, average height. Another mentioned a shadowy figure near the tree line, though no one could confirm it was the same person. A security camera across the street had a blurry image, nothing definitive, but enough to suggest she had not left entirely on her own. Aaron Clemens was questioned within hours. He denied seeing her after the fireworks, insisting he had left early, gone home to sleep. His alibi was flimsy, though no one could immediately disprove it. Still, he walked free. The search for Elena began in earnest that day. Volunteers combed the riverside, the nearby trails, the dense foliage of the surrounding woods. Dogs traced her scent a few hundred yards before it disappeared entirely, as if the ground itself had swallowed her. Small pieces of evidence, a single earring, a strand of hair, a torn strap of her camera bag, were found scattered, but they offered no clue to her destination or the hand that might have guided her there. Her mother waited at home, replaying the last texts, the last words. Almost home, cameras full, gonna crash. The message had been so mundane, so ordinary, a sentence anyone would have written after a long day, and yet it now carried the weight of loss, of absence, of uncertainty. Marjorie refused to leave the house, refusing to believe the world outside could continue while her daughter had vanished. Detective Ward worked late into the night, reviewing witness statements, mapping locations, retracing Elena's steps through photographs and descriptions. Each thread seemed to fray at the edges, every account contradictory in some way. And yet, a pattern emerged. The figure in the denim jacket. Aaron. He appeared consistently, in the peripheral, uncomfortably close. The town watched from a distance. Asheville, usually quiet and protective, felt the first tremors of unease. People whispered, exchanged theories, speculated wildly on television news segments. Was she kidnapped? Did she leave voluntarily? Could she be hiding somewhere in the surrounding hills? Each day without answers hardened the tension, made the air thick with fear. By the second day, police had canvassed the streets, the riverbanks, and the wooded paths nearby. Volunteers joined the effort, carrying flashlights, marking grids, and calling out Elena's name into the humid night. A search dog barked in the underbrush, picking up a faint scent that disappeared abruptly. It was as if she had simply been erased. And in the quiet of her studio, untouched except for the faint hum of electricity, Elena's camera rested where she had left it. A silent witness to the night that had changed everything. Someone, somewhere, had taken her. By the third day, the case had reached the local news. Footage of the party, images of the riverside, and interviews with friends and family painted a portrait of a girl everyone knew, everyone liked, and now everyone feared had been taken. Messages poured in, tips, sightings, anonymous calls, but none led anywhere concrete. The investigation had only just begun. And as Detective Ward stared at the maps, the photographs, the threads of a story yet to be told, she felt it in her bones. This wasn't just a missing person case. Something far darker had moved through Asheville that night. Something that had taken Elena Sinclair, a girl who captured life through her lens, and held her in a place the town could not yet see. And so the first chapter of the search began. A night that ended with the ordinary hum of fireworks fading, a girl who vanished into the shadows, and a town holding its breath, waiting for the story to unfold. The morning after Elena Sinclair vanished, Asheville awoke to a calm that felt unnatural, almost forced. The sun spilled over the mountain ridges, scattering gold across the streets, yet the air was heavy with unease. Small towns had a way of noticing when one of their own went missing. Neighbors whispered over fences, shopkeepers exchanged anxious glances, and the hum of daily life was interrupted by the quiet dread that something terrible had occurred. Marjorie Sinclair was the first to call the police in earnest. The night before, she had hoped, she had prayed, that Elena would return on her own, that perhaps she had been delayed, that some miscommunication had kept her from calling home. But as the hours ticked past and messages went unanswered, the hope that had clung like morning mist began to thin. By 8 a.m., she picked up the phone. Her voice trembled, a fragile line of sound that carried the weight of fear and uncertainty. "Detective Ward," she asked, once she was connected to the Asheville Police Department. "It's Marjorie Sinclair. My daughter, she's missing. Elena hasn't come home. She didn't call. She didn't show up at her studio. I don't know what to do." Lena Ward had heard this kind of call before, but there was something in Marjorie's tone, something that made her pause and listen closer. It wasn't just the panic, it was the quiet, steady fear beneath it. The understanding that this wasn't a teenager skipping town or an adult taking an impromptu trip. This was someone who would not just vanish. Ward arrived at the Sinclair home within the hour, accompanied by her partner, Detective Michael Dorsey. They spoke quietly to Marjorie, taking notes, asking questions about Elena's last known movements, her friends, her habits, her routines. They learned she had been at the Riverside fireworks celebration the previous night, had left around 1 a.m., and never returned. Her car remained where she had parked it, keys in the ignition, driver's seat empty. "That's unusual," Dorsey murmured, kneeling beside the car as Ward examined it. There were no signs of forced entry, no evidence of struggle beyond the simple fact of absence. It was as though she had simply walked into the night and been plucked away. The initial search began immediately. Volunteers and officers fanned out along the riverside, scanning the tall grass, the scattered trees, the stone paths leading down to the water. Flashlights pierced the pre-dawn darkness, their beams cutting swaths through the mist that rolled off the river. Dogs were brought in to trace her scent. The first traces led a few hundred feet along a narrow trail before disappearing entirely, leaving the searchers with nothing but shadows and unanswered questions. Meanwhile, Marjorie and her son Caleb combed through Elena's personal space, trying to uncover anything that might provide a clue. They found the camera bag was gone, her journal untouched but open to the last entry, a simple note about the fireworks and her excitement to capture the night. Her phone had been charged, fully functional, yet no calls or messages had come through. Her wallet, keys, and personal items were all accounted for. Everything in her life seemed intact, except for Elena herself. The police began the painstaking work of interviewing anyone who might have seen her that night. Friends from the party were questioned at length, recalling fragments of conversations, passing glimpses, the way she had smiled or laughed. Most could only confirm that she had left alone, heading toward her car. One witness remembered a figure standing near the tree line, a man watching from the shadows. Another recalled seeing her with a man who had approached her in a casual, almost polite manner, lingering too long for comfort. Names were exchanged, descriptions logged, but the evidence remained inconclusive. Aaron Clemens, the man who had shown a particular interest in Elena in recent weeks, was questioned next. He insisted he had left the party before Elena, claiming he had gone home to sleep. His story was detailed, careful, rehearsed, but Detective Ward noted inconsistencies. His vehicle had been parked near the area of the disappearance. Multiple witnesses had seen him lingering nearby. Yet, without concrete proof, he could not be detained. He walked free that morning, leaving behind a growing sense of unease that would only intensify in the weeks to come. The community reacted as communities always do in these moments. Rumors spread quickly. One shopkeeper swore she had seen Elena boarding a car with an unknown man. A teenager insisted he had glimpsed her climbing into a vehicle by the river, though he couldn't identify the driver. Speculation ran rampant. Had she been kidnapped? Had she run away voluntarily? Could she have been taken by someone she knew? In the absence of answers, fear took root. Detective Ward focused on the few concrete pieces of evidence that could guide the investigation. The torn strap of Elena's camera, discovered along the riverbank near the parking lot, suggested she had struggled or been pulled away. A single earring, matching one she had worn the night before, was found near a patch of brush along the trail. It was small, seemingly insignificant, yet in a case like this, such details mattered. Every strand of hair, every misplaced item, every footprint became a thread in a tapestry Ward was determined to unravel. The initial search area expanded rapidly. Officers moved beyond the immediate riverside, combing the surrounding woods, the trails that led into residential neighborhoods, the small creeks and tributaries feeding into the river. Helicopters joined the effort by the second day, scanning from above, cameras recording every inch of forest and stream. Volunteers brought boats to the river, scanning the banks for signs of a struggle, a discarded item, anything that might point toward Elena's whereabouts. Despite the growing effort, the case stalled. Days turned into nights with little to show for the massive search. The river remained calm, indifferent to the turmoil surrounding it. The woods held their secrets tightly, the trails fading into nothingness. Each lead seemed to dissolve into dead ends, each witness account contradictory or incomplete. Marjorie and Caleb held vigils at the river each evening, bringing candles, folding chairs, and photographs of Elena. Friends joined when they could, holding signs, calling her name into the night. It became a ritual of hope, of refusal to accept that she was gone, of determination to keep her presence alive even in absence. Media coverage began to grow. Local news stations ran stories, printing photos of Elena. The bright smile, the camera in hand, the girl everyone in Asheville knew. Calls poured in from citizens claiming sightings in neighboring towns, from anonymous tipsters offering vague hints or outright false leads. Ward sifted through these carefully, separating the credible from the imagined. Every day, the case became more complex, the threads more tangled. One lead stood out in particular. A hiker had reported seeing a dark blue truck parked along a secluded trail near the river the day after the disappearance. The description matched Aaron Clemens' vehicle. Investigators brought him in for questioning again, this time pushing harder. Aaron maintained his story, claiming he had been home alone, his alibi vague but technically unbreakable. Without physical evidence tying him to the disappearance, Ward was forced to release him. It was a frustrating, almost infuriating moment. A man seen near the scene, a suspect with motive, and yet untouchable. The weeks stretched on. Search efforts continued, though the intensity of the first days began to wane. Volunteers returned to their routines, though many couldn't escape the thought of Elena lingering somewhere, trapped, waiting for someone to find her. Ward and Dorsey remained relentless, reviewing maps, analyzing witness statements, re-examining every shred of evidence. They interviewed neighbors, shopkeepers, and anyone who had traveled through the Riverside area that night. Small inconsistencies emerged. A broken street lamp noted in one account but absent in another. A shadow moving across the parking lot, reported by 2 witnesses. The same denim jacket glimpsed near the trees by 3 separate observers. Each day, the tension mounted. The town felt its heartbeat quicken, matching the fear that coursed through the families involved. The Sinclair home remained a constant reminder of absence. Marjorie refused to leave the living room, staring at the phone, at the calendar, at anything that might give a sign of her daughter. Caleb walked the streets in search of friends, in search of a clue, in search of the world that had suddenly grown impossibly large and terrifyingly empty. By the 3rd week, the police had exhausted the initial leads. A statewide alert was issued. Local law enforcement coordinated with nearby counties, sharing photos, vehicle descriptions, and witness statements. Crime scene analysts reviewed the photographs taken of the riverbank, the trail, and the parking lot. Every inch of land was catalogued, mapped, and cross-referenced. The torn camera strap, the earring, and the few other items recovered were analyzed for DNA, fingerprints, and fibers. Ward and Dorsey worked late into the nights, mapping timelines, reconstructing events minute by minute. They interviewed friends again, this time with more focus on the dynamics of Elena's relationships, her interactions with Aaron, her social circles, her patterns of movement through Asheville. Slowly, a picture began to form. Not a full picture, not yet, but fragments that suggested intentionality behind the disappearance. Someone had taken her. Someone who knew her routines. Someone who had been watching. And in the quiet of their office, with maps spread across tables and photographs pinned to the walls, Ward and Dorsey made a silent vow. They would find her. No matter how long it took, no matter how tangled the threads became, they would find Elena Sinclair. The town continued to watch and wait, holding its breath, hoping against hope that the girl with the camera would return. And though the days stretched into weeks and the weeks into months, the search never truly ended. Every shadow, every unexplained movement, every anonymous tip became a whisper of possibility. Somewhere, hidden in the landscape of Asheville and its surrounding forests, a story was unfolding. A story of fear, of courage, and of a girl whose life had been interrupted in the quietest, most devastating way. The search for Elena Sinclair had begun, and for Detective Lena Ward, for Marjorie Sinclair, and for Caleb, it would not end until every last piece of the puzzle was uncovered, until the girl who had vanished in the night was found, or the truth was revealed. The days after Elena Sinclair vanished stretched like an endless current, each one carrying with it a fresh wave of anxiety that washed over Asheville in ways that could not be measured. The town, usually so calm and self-contained, began to feel different, almost fragile, as if the disappearance of one young woman had shifted the balance of the streets, the rivers, and even the mountains themselves. People went about their routines, yes, but there was a tension, subtle but persistent, that threaded through conversations, hung in the air at cafes, and settled like a weight in the offices of law enforcement. Detective Lena Ward sat in the small, dimly lit office that had become a second home to her since the day Elena disappeared. Maps of the town and surrounding Riverside were plastered across the walls, strings connecting locations, witnesses, and fragments of evidence. Every photograph taken at the scene, every report, every tip that had come in was meticulously catalogued, yet none brought the clarity she sought. It was as if the threads of the case were slipping through her fingers, leaving behind only shadow and frustration. Marjorie Sinclair spent her days and nights oscillating between hope and despair. She kept the house in a state of tense order, cups washed, furniture aligned, photographs displayed, as if controlling the environment could somehow reach across the void and bring Elena home. Caleb, Elena's younger brother, roamed the town and surrounding trails, questioning friends, acquaintances, and anyone who might have seen her. He was fueled by a mixture of fear and determination, the kind of drive that comes only when someone you love has been wrenched from the familiar rhythms of life. Each day, new tips arrived. Anonymous calls, at sometimes hours apart, sometimes days, claimed sightings in towns miles away. One tip suggested she had been seen hitchhiking toward the neighboring counties. Another said a woman matching her description had been spotted in a diner late at night. Ward and Dorsey followed every lead, traveling hours to confirm or deny them. Most proved false, but each false lead brought with it a strange mix of frustration and faint hope. The possibility that something, anything, would lead them closer to Elena. In those early weeks, the town rallied around the Sinclair family. Flyers were distributed across Asheville and surrounding towns, photographs of Elena with her bright smile and camera in hand plastered to walls, telephone poles, and store windows. Candlelight vigils were held near the river where she had last been seen, a community effort to call her back through voice and memory. Yet each evening, the reality sank deeper. Elena had vanished without a trace. Aaron Clemens, the man who had lingered near her on the night of the fireworks, became a focal point for both the family and the detectives. Ward revisited his statements, reviewed his alibi, and re-interviewed witnesses. Yet the case remained circumstantial. There was no hard evidence linking him to the disappearance, no fingerprints, no DNA, nothing definitive. He remained free, a shadow that hovered over the investigation, the discomfort of his presence never far from Ward's mind. It was in the third week after Elena's disappearance that the first truly tangible clue emerged. A fisherman familiar with the river's winding banks reported seeing something strange while casting his line near a small, overgrown trail that led away from the main riverside path. At first he assumed it was debris, something discarded carelessly in the night. But when he approached, he found a small bundle, wrapped tightly in a dark cloth. It contained Elena's camera bag, the one missing since the night of the fireworks. Inside, the camera itself was gone, but personal items remained: a notebook, a pair of gloves, and a small necklace she had worn daily. The discovery sent shockwaves through the investigation. It was evidence, however small, that someone had taken her possessions intentionally. Ward and Dorsey combed the surrounding area, searching for tracks, fibers, anything that might lead them further. The ground was soft from recent rain, but days had passed since the disappearance, and the prints were faint, partial, and frustratingly incomplete. Still, the bundle confirmed what Ward had feared. This was not a random disappearance. Someone had orchestrated it. As days bled into weeks, the strain on the Sinclair family deepened. Marjorie oscillated between phone calls to the police, organizing search parties, and sitting quietly in the living room, staring at the last photograph of Elena taken before the fireworks. Caleb grew quieter, the determined energy that had driven him at first slowly tempered by frustration and fear. Friends and extended family tried to provide comfort, but the absence was palpable, a constant echo in the rooms where Elena's presence had once been felt. Meanwhile, Ward expanded her investigation. They reviewed phone records, tracking the last calls and messages, looking for anything out of place. They examined vehicle registrations and rental records in neighboring counties. Surveillance footage, though limited in 1998, was collected from local stores near the riverside and along main roads. Nothing definitive emerged, but the net was widening, the search growing more methodical, more focused. The detectives also revisited the fireworks celebration itself. They spoke to vendors, performers, and volunteers, attempting to reconstruct Elena's movements with more precision. Some recalled seeing her take photographs near the riverbank. Others remembered her walking toward her car shortly before midnight. Patterns emerged: the lingering figure in the denim jacket, the shadow near the tree line, the sudden absence of Elena herself. Each detail was catalogued, cross-referenced, and analyzed, but the picture remained incomplete, frustratingly so. Then there were the false leads that cut into hope like knives. Days after the disappearance, a woman called claiming Elena had been seen in a diner several towns away, appearing frightened and disoriented. Ward and Dorsey followed immediately, checking surveillance tapes and questioning staff. Nothing matched. Another anonymous tip suggested that she had been forced into a vehicle on the outskirts of Asheville, but the witness couldn't provide a description, only a vague impression of the driver. Each lead consumed resources, energy, and emotional reserves, yet yielded nothing concrete. The psychological toll was immense. Ward often worked long nights alone, reviewing files, mapping movements, and thinking through motives. She understood the patterns, the obsession, the planning, the subtle ways someone could orchestrate a disappearance in a town that prided itself on familiarity. Every suspect, every witness, every tip was filtered through that lens. Yet, despite the painstaking work, the investigation was at a standstill. Meanwhile, the town's anxiety was palpable. Neighborhoods were quieter, parents kept a closer eye on their children, and conversations in cafes often drifted to Elena. Rumors circulated. Some claimed she had run away. Others insisted she had been kidnapped by someone known to her. Social gatherings were tinged with caution, everyone aware that the night of the fireworks had not ended in celebration for one young woman and her family. Ward returned repeatedly to Erin Clemens, now the central figure in her line of inquiry. She reviewed witness statements again, attempting to identify inconsistencies, behaviors, anything that might tie him to the disappearance. He had left town briefly after the initial interviews, traveling through several states before returning, a pattern that seemed innocuous on the surface but troubled the detectives. Yet, without physical evidence, the law constrained them. Erin remained untouchable, a man hovering at the edge of suspicion, untethered by certainty. By the end of the fourth week, frustration had solidified into determination. Ward and Dorsey organized a concentrated search of the areas surrounding the river, including the overgrown trails and small tributaries that might have provided cover for someone attempting to hide a person. They brought in volunteers, additional officers, and equipment to illuminate the dense foliage. Dogs traced scents, their noses to the ground, alert and tense. Yet, despite the effort, Elena remained elusive. Her presence felt only in the small items recovered and the memories of those who had seen her that night. It was in this period of growing tension and quiet despair that the first glimmers of a potential breakthrough emerged. A forensic analyst reviewing the small personal items recovered from the camera bag noted fibers and traces that didn't match the Sinclair household or the riverside environment. While small, these fibers suggested a location, possibly a vehicle or another residence that could be linked to the abductor. The discovery reinvigorated the detectives, providing a thread to follow, a tangible lead amidst the fog of uncertainty. Meanwhile, Marjorie Sinclair and Caleb continued their vigil. They organized search parties, distributed flyers, and spoke to the media, keeping Elena's image in the public eye. Each day without news was excruciating, each false lead a knife twisting deeper into hope. Yet they persisted, driven by the knowledge that giving up was not an option. By the end of the second month, the investigation had evolved into a complex, multifaceted operation. Ward coordinated with neighboring counties, reviewing vehicle records, interviewing transient populations, and re-examining all tips with meticulous attention. Each piece of evidence, no matter how small, was scrutinized, cross-referenced, and catalogued. The search was exhaustive, consuming the town and its police department, yet Elena remained just beyond reach, her absence a persistent shadow over Asheville. And as the town struggled with the growing realization that a young woman could vanish so completely, so deliberately, a subtle but undeniable truth emerged. This was not a random act. Someone had planned, someone had waited, someone had acted with precision. The shadows of that night still lingered along the riverbanks, in the alleys, and in the quiet corners of the town. And somewhere the person responsible remained, watching, waiting, unaccountable. For Detective Ward, Marjorie, and Caleb, the breaking point had come. The moment when the reality of the situation could no longer be ignored, when hope and despair collided, and the search for Elena Sinclair became more than a mission. It became a necessity, an obsession, a race against time that would demand every resource, every skill, and every ounce of human determination they could muster. The girl who had captured the town's life through her lens was gone, but the story of her disappearance was just beginning to unfold. And somewhere in the layers of evidence, in the fragments of truth scattered across Asheville, the path to finding her and uncovering the person who had taken her had begun to take shape. If you want, I can now continue the story exactly in the same style, picking up from where it left off. Do you want me to do that? Weeks had passed since Elena Sinclair vanished from the Riverside fireworks, and Asheville remained a town suspended in quiet unease. Life went on, as life always does. But beneath the surface, fear and suspicion rippled through the streets. Children were watched more closely, friends exchanged wary glances, and even the simple act of walking home after sunset carried a subtle tension that hadn't existed before. For those who knew Elena, the absence of her presence was palpable, an emptiness that settled like dust over the familiar corners of the town. Detective Lena Ward sat at her desk, a map of Asheville pinned before her, dozens of photographs and notes surrounding it. Her eyes traced the routes Elena had taken on the night of her disappearance, the trail of witnesses' accounts, and the small personal items recovered from the riverbank. Among the fibers found in Elena's camera bag, gloves, a necklace, strands of cloth, one detail caught Ward's attention. The fibers were synthetic, matching a type of seat upholstery used in certain mid-1990s trucks. A vehicle. A man's vehicle. It was a small thread, almost invisible, but in a case like this, small threads were everything. Ward began to cross-reference vehicle registrations, looking for trucks matching the description and location of Aaron Clemens's known movements. The pattern was subtle but present, a dark blue truck seen near the riverside the night of the fireworks. The kind of vehicle with the exact upholstery fibers recovered. Ward's pulse quickened. This was a lead that could be followed. Meanwhile, Marjorie Sinclair refused to sit idle. She organized another community search, distributing flyers, making public appeals, and connecting with other families who had experienced similar disappearances. She knew that the longer Elena remained missing, the harder it would become to find her. Every day was a critical day. Every shadow could hide a clue. Every stranger could hold an answer. Then came the anonymous call. It arrived late one evening, the voice low and hesitant, but firm enough to be credible. "She's not far. She's in a place people wouldn't think to look. Near the woods, but not the woods. Someone's been keeping her." The tip was vague, offering no name, no precise location, but it had the effect Ward had hoped for. It sparked direction, giving the investigation a thread to pull. The detectives returned to the river, re-examining the wooded paths, the small tributaries, the narrow trails that led away from the main roads. They catalogued each turn, each clearing, each shadowy patch where someone could have hidden or transported a person without being seen. Hours were spent scanning the undergrowth, mapping patterns, noting possible escape routes and concealment areas. And it was there, amid the overgrown brambles near a narrow, seldom-used trail, that the first truly promising clue emerged. A discarded piece of synthetic cloth, matching the fibers found in the camera bag. It had been partially buried, likely in an attempt to hide it, but time and weather had not erased it entirely. DNA swabs were taken, carefully preserved, and sent to the state lab. It was the first tangible connection to the person who had taken Elena. A thread leading from disappearance to perpetrator. The discovery created a renewed energy within the department. Ward and Dorsey revisited the list of suspects, focusing on those known to frequent the area, those with access to a vehicle matching the description, and those with prior history that suggested potential for violence or obsession. Aaron Clemens naturally became the primary focus. While he had an alibi for certain periods, the circumstantial evidence, vehicle sightings, witness accounts, fibers, could not be ignored. Interviews were conducted again, this time more strategically. Neighbors who lived near the riverside and surrounding trails were questioned about unusual activity in the weeks leading up to the fireworks. One woman recalled seeing Aaron's truck parked for hours near a trailhead, an unusual pattern for someone who claimed to have left town early that night. Another witness remembered the truck leaving late, around the time Elena vanished, with headlights off, moving slowly along the dirt path. Each recollection, while fragmentary, added weight to the theory that Aaron had been involved. At the same time, forensic analysts worked tirelessly in the lab. The synthetic fibers were examined for microscopic traces, hairs, skin cells, and other potential biological evidence. The presence of Elena's DNA on a fragment of the cloth provided the breakthrough Ward had been waiting for. There was physical evidence tying her directly to the suspect's vehicle. This evidence shifted the investigation from circumstantial suspicion to actionable leads. Ward secured a warrant to search Aaron's property and vehicle. Officers prepared for a meticulous, cautious operation, knowing that the suspect could act unpredictably if confronted. Marjorie and Caleb were kept informed, though the detectives shielded them from the most graphic or speculative details, preserving their hope while preparing for the possibility of confronting the reality of Aaron's role. The day of the search arrived, heavy with anticipation. Officers combed Aaron's property, examining vehicles, storage sheds, and hidden areas with precision. It was in the bed of the dark blue truck that a small bundle was discovered, partially concealed under a top. Inside were several personal items: clothing, a small backpack, and a folded blanket. Most importantly, traces of biological material indicated recent presence of a person. Ward's team moved with care, photographing, collecting, and preserving every item. For the Sinclair family, the discovery was both terrifying and cautiously hopeful. Marjorie clutched her son's hand as they were briefed, the tension coiling tightly in her chest. "Is she?" she whispered, voice trembling, though no one could yet answer definitively. Ward assured her that the evidence suggested Elena had been kept alive, that the forensic trail indicated presence, not disappearance alone. Meanwhile, interrogations with Aaron intensified. Ward and Dorsey presented the fibers, the vehicle evidence, the witness statements, and the forensic findings. His responses were measured, defensive, but cracks began to show in the careful facade. The psychological pressure of investigation, combined with the mounting physical evidence, made it increasingly difficult for him to maintain consistency. Ward noted every pause, every evasive answer, every subtle inconsistency. Additional tips poured in after the property search became public knowledge. Neighbors, previously hesitant to speak, came forward with information: vehicles seen leaving the property late at night, noises from the shed, patterns of movement that had seemed ordinary but now appeared sinister. Each tip corroborated the growing picture. Elena had been held, controlled, and hidden, and Aaron had maintained close oversight of her environment. Forensic analysis continued, tracing fibers, hairs, and DNA across multiple locations connected to Aaron. The pieces slowly came together, forming a map of movement, concealment, and interaction that allowed the detectives to reconstruct a timeline. They could see where she had been kept, when she had been moved, and the approximate pattern of Aaron's activities during the critical days after the disappearance. Community anxiety, however, was reaching a tipping point. Asheville's newspapers ran stories highlighting the evidence against Aaron, though authorities carefully emphasized that he remained a suspect until charges could be filed. Citizens organized search parties, vigil groups, and community meetings, sharing observations and keeping Elena's story in the public consciousness. The combination of official investigation and community engagement created a dual pressure on the suspect and the environment in which the investigation operated. Through it all, Detective Ward remained methodical, precise, and focused. She reviewed every witness statement again, cross-referencing with timelines, GPS evidence from vehicles, and the forensic details from the truck. A pattern began to emerge that suggested premeditation. Aaron had likely observed Elena for days before the fireworks, anticipated her movements, and executed the disappearance with careful planning. Each new piece of evidence reinforced the gravity of the crime, the meticulousness of the suspect, and the urgency of bringing Elena home safely. Then, on a humid afternoon, the breakthrough came. In a small, concealed area behind Aaron's shed, investigators found a hidden space, a makeshift compartment, reinforced and carefully concealed beneath layers of debris. Inside were signs of habitation, a folded blanket, remnants of food, personal items that belonged to Elena, and traces of her presence confirmed through forensic testing. The realization hit Ward and Dorsey immediately. Elena Sinclair was alive. The news was relayed to Marjorie and Caleb with careful precision, balancing hope with the gravity of the situation. The search had not ended in tragedy. It had ended in revelation. The girl they had feared, lost to the night, had survived. She had been kept hidden, controlled, and monitored, but she had survived. The stage was now set for the final confrontation. Aaron Clemens would face not only the weight of forensic evidence, but also the careful, coordinated effort of law enforcement prepared to bring Elena safely back into the world she had been torn from. The threads of the investigation, painstakingly collected, meticulously analyzed, and strategically followed, had converged to reveal the path forward. And in that moment, as the sun dipped behind the mountains and cast long shadows across Asheville, a town long suspended in fear felt the first tentative stirrings of relief. The girl with the camera, the girl who had vanished into darkness, was about to return. The thread in the darkness had been found, and the story of her disappearance, the story of the crime and the fear that had gripped a community, was entering its final decisive chapter. The day of the rescue began in the soft light of early morning, with a quiet that contrasted sharply with the chaos that had consumed Asheville since Elena Sinclair disappeared. Birds chirped in the distance, and the mountains glimmered faintly in the rising sun, but the tranquility belied the tension at the heart of the operation. Law enforcement officers, meticulously coordinated, gathered at the staging area near Aaron Clemens's property. Every step had been planned, every possible outcome considered, and yet no one could predict exactly how the man would respond once they confronted him. Detective Lena Ward stood at the front of the staging area, reviewing maps and notes, her voice calm but edged with determination. "Remember," she said, "we bring her out safely first. Evidence second. We follow protocol. We keep this contained. Our priority is Elena." Her partner, Detective Michael Dorsey, nodded silently, checking his gear and ensuring communication lines were clear. The team had rehearsed the operation multiple times in the preceding hours, but nothing could replace the reality of stepping into a location where a person had been held against her will for weeks. The perimeter was secured first. Officers fanned out around the property, covering every possible escape route, from the dense wooded areas to the main road leading to the residence. Helicopters circled overhead, their quiet presence a deterrent, their cameras recording every inch. Behind locked doors in the quiet of their staging area, Ward reviewed the last reports, the fibers, the eyewitness accounts, the traces of Elena's presence. Everything pointed to one place, one house, one man. Marjorie Sinclair and Caleb were kept a safe distance away, unable to witness the initial operation but informed of every step. The anxiety in Marjorie's chest was a physical ache, but she refused to leave the area. Caleb, her son, paced, a restless tension coursing through him. Both knew, as Ward had explained, that the next hours could change everything. The approach to Aaron Clemens' property was deliberate and quiet. Officers moved slowly, scanning windows, doors, and sheds for any sign of movement. It was Ward who first noticed the subtle signs. A door slightly ajar, a small indentation in the soft earth suggesting recent movement, the faintest scent of soap and bleach that indicated someone had been maintaining the space. Elena had been there. She was close. Ward radioed back to the team. "Hold positions. We have movement inside. Keep it contained. Approach with caution." The first encounter came unexpectedly. Aaron, surprised but defiant, emerged from the hidden compartment behind the shed. His eyes darted, calculating, aware that the operation had closed in on him. He attempted to retreat into the house, but officers blocked every exit. There was a tense standoff, words exchanged, warnings shouted. Ward stepped forward, her voice calm but authoritative. "This ends now, Aaron. There's no way out. Elena Sinclair is coming out with us. No one gets hurt if you comply." He hesitated, the weight of the mounting evidence pressing down on him. The fibers, the vehicle sightings, the forensic traces, every lie and evasive statement he had made now loomed in stark relief. Slowly, Reluctantly, he complied, allowing the officers to secure the property and ensure that Elena could be recovered safely. Inside the hidden compartment, Elena was weak, exhausted, but alive. Her eyes widened as Ward approached, gently guiding her out into the light of morning. The first thing she noticed was the sky, a brilliant, almost painfully beautiful expanse of blue, and then, in the distance, the reassuring sight of uniformed officers and the faint figures of her family waiting. "Mom, Caleb," she whispered, voice trembling, disbelief and relief warring in equal measure. Marjorie ran forward, dropping to her knees, enveloping Elena in an embrace that seemed to last forever. Tears streamed freely, not just for the relief of finding her alive, but for the terror and uncertainty that had consumed the previous weeks. Caleb wrapped his arms around his sister, holding her tightly as though willing to shield her from all the world's darkness. Ward observed quietly, allowing the reunion to unfold. In her experience, the emotional release after such rescues was a mixture of joy, relief, and the sobering reality of what had occurred. Elena had survived, yes, but she had been trapped, isolated, and at the mercy of someone whose actions were deliberate, calculated, and cruel. Paramedics moved in next, carefully assessing Elena's condition. She was malnourished and dehydrated, but otherwise physically unharmed. Ward and Dorsey provided statements, ensuring the scene remained controlled while forensic teams documented the property, collected additional evidence, and began the process of building a case against Aaron Clemens. As news of the rescue spread, Asheville felt the first tremors of collective relief. The local radio and television stations broadcast the story carefully, emphasizing that Elena was safe and that law enforcement had acted decisively. The community, which had been gripped by fear and anxiety, began to process the magnitude of what had occurred. Vigils transformed from mourning gatherings into celebrations of survival. People wept in the streets, hugged, and shared their joy that the girl they had feared lost to the darkness had returned. In the following hours, Ward and her team conducted interviews with Elena, gathering information about her captor, the conditions of her confinement, and the movements that had been orchestrated by Aaron. She recounted the fear, the isolation, and the careful monitoring that had kept her from escaping. Her testimony, though fragmented and emotionally charged, provided critical insight into the suspect's behavior and mindset. It was the missing piece that, combined with forensic evidence, witness accounts, and surveillance, would solidify the case against him. Aaron Clemens was formally arrested later that day. He was charged with multiple counts, including kidnapping, unlawful restraint, and endangerment. The arrest was carried out with precision, minimizing risk and ensuring that he could not threaten Elena further. Handcuffed and surrounded by officers, Aaron's demeanor was a mixture of defiance and defeat. Ward noted the subtle collapse of the careful persona he had maintained since the disappearance, a man who had calculated, planned, and acted, now confronted by the undeniable consequences of his choices. For Marjorie and Caleb, the arrest was both satisfying and sobering. Satisfaction, because justice had begun to take shape. Sobering, because it meant confronting the reality of the trauma their daughter had endured. Ward provided support, guiding them through the immediate legal steps, the collection of statements, and the process of ensuring that Elena's recovery was prioritized over all else. Medical and psychological support were provided immediately. Elena began the slow process of physical and emotional recovery, guided by professionals trained to help victims of prolonged captivity. She received counseling, care, and the support of her family, who had endured the terror of uncertainty for weeks. Each small milestone, a full meal, a walk outside, the first night sleeping peacefully in her own bed, became a victory, a reclaiming of the life that had been interrupted. The forensic team continued their work on Aaron's property, documenting every item, every trace, every sign that could support prosecution. The fibers, DNA samples, and other evidence collected from the truck, shed, and hidden compartment formed a comprehensive web connecting Aaron to Elena's disappearance and captivity. The meticulous attention to detail ensured that the case would stand in court, presenting a clear narrative of abduction, control, and intent. Community response remained a vital part of the recovery process. Volunteers organized celebrations of safety, ensuring that Elena's return was acknowledged publicly while also providing the space for private healing. Ward maintained communication with the family, reinforcing the importance of balancing media exposure with the need for personal recovery. The rescue, while a moment of relief and joy, also marked the beginning of a new chapter: the pursuit of justice. Aaron Clemens would face the weight of evidence and the testimony of his victim. Asheville, once gripped by fear and uncertainty, would witness the process of accountability unfold. And for Elena Sinclair, the girl who had vanished into darkness, the world she had been forced to leave behind began to reassert itself. Light, air, freedom. These were simple things, now treasured. Every sound, every touch, every familiar corner of her hometown took on new significance. She had survived, not just physically, but emotionally, guided by resilience, hope, and the determination of those who refused to let her story end in disappearance. Detective Ward reflected quietly as she watched the family reunite. In her years of service, she had learned that justice was often slow, fragmented, and imperfect. But in this case, the threads had come together. Planning, forensic science, witness cooperation, and community vigilance had converged to restore life where it had been interrupted. The girl with the camera, the girl who had disappeared in the night, had returned to the light. The operation was a testament to persistence, to the refusal to accept uncertainty, and to the power of careful, methodical investigation. Elena's story was no longer one of disappearance alone. It was a story of survival, of courage, and of a community that had refused to let fear dictate the outcome. The rescue of Elena Sinclair had sent ripples through Asheville, waves of relief and emotion washing over the town in ways that could not be measured. Yet, even as the initial euphoria settled, Detective Lena Ward knew the most critical phase was just beginning. Rescuing Elena was one thing. Ensuring that justice followed was another entirely. Every piece of evidence collected, every fiber, every trace of DNA, every witness statement would have to be meticulously documented, cross-referenced, and legally sound. The town had watched the disappearance unfold, had waited with bated breath for the girl to be returned, and now all eyes would turn to the process of accountability. Aaron Clemens was held in a secure facility, a mixture of defiance and resignation etched into his features. He had maintained a carefully controlled persona for weeks, even months, but the undeniable convergence of evidence, the fibers linking him to the vehicle, the hidden compartment, the personal items recovered, had begun to erode his facade. Ward and Dorsey began a new phase, building a case that would survive in court. It was painstaking work, precise and deliberate, because the stakes could not have been higher. Forensic teams were tasked with documenting the condition and placement of every recovered item. The synthetic fibers found in the camera bag, matched to the truck's upholstery, were catalogued and photographed. Biological samples taken from the hidden compartment behind the shed underwent rigorous testing, confirming not only the presence of Elena, but also evidence of sustained confinement. Each result was logged, analyzed, and verified by independent labs to ensure reliability. Witnesses who had seen Aaron's truck, who had observed unusual activity around the riverside and surrounding trails, were re-interviewed. Their statements were cross-checked, clarifying times, movements, and observations. Each new detail added depth to the timeline of the night of the fireworks and the subsequent days when Elena had been held. Ward knew that the prosecution's case would rely heavily on these connections. The narrative of movement, concealment, and control had to be airtight. Meanwhile, the Sinclair family began navigating the delicate process of healing and recovery. Marjorie and Caleb spent hours with Elena, reintroducing her to the rhythms of normal life. Simple things, often taken for granted, now precious. Walking down familiar streets, sitting in the local cafe, visiting the riverside where the fireworks had been held. Each outing was a reclaiming of the world that had been disrupted, and each day brought small milestones. Laughter returned, trust in safety slowly rebuilt, and the trauma of isolation began to give way to the possibility of a future. The community remained deeply engaged. Asheville's residents had experienced collective anxiety for weeks, and the return of Elena did not erase the tension entirely. Meetings were held, stories shared, and conversations arose about vigilance, safety, and the mechanisms by which someone could disappear unnoticed. The incident had transformed the town's sense of security, introducing both caution and a renewed awareness of the vulnerabilities in their surroundings. As the investigation tightened, the legal team prepared for Aaron's prosecution. Ward worked closely with the district attorney's office, ensuring that the evidence collected would support multiple counts: kidnapping, unlawful restraint, and endangerment, among others. Each charge had to be substantiated with forensic detail, eyewitness accounts, and testimony from Elena herself. The complexity of the case required meticulous preparation, but it was necessary to guarantee that the law could reach its intended conclusion. Elena's testimony became central. With the support of therapists and legal advocates, she recounted her ordeal with clarity and courage. Her descriptions of the hidden compartment, the routines imposed by her captor, and the small moments of fear and hope she had experienced were detailed and consistent. Each account strengthened the case, providing a human dimension to the evidence collected, a living witness to the calculated crime that had upended not only her life, but the lives of everyone who loved her. Media coverage, though carefully managed, played a significant role in keeping the story alive and in maintaining public attention on the case. Local newspapers ran features highlighting the investigative breakthroughs, the bravery of law enforcement, and the resilience of the Sinclair family. Television coverage offered interviews with Ward and Dorsey, emphasizing both the meticulous work of the police and the importance of community vigilance. Care was taken to avoid sensationalizing the events, focusing instead on truth, recovery, and accountability. The legal process progressed methodically. Evidence was catalogued, exhibits prepared, and witness lists finalized. Ward reviewed every detail repeatedly, ensuring that no inconsistency, no overlooked fact could undermine the prosecution. The narrative was clear. Aaron Clemens had premeditated Elena's abduction, orchestrated her confinement, and attempted to evade capture. The physical evidence and human testimony aligned to support this narrative, forming a compelling case for the court. In parallel, the psychological and emotional recovery of Elena became a priority. Ward and the Sinclair family coordinated with specialists, ensuring that the young woman who had endured fear, isolation, and control could rebuild a sense of agency and safety. Counseling sessions explored coping strategies, trust rebuilding, and processing trauma. Small victories, a meal shared without fear, a walk outside without panic, became markers of progress, tangible signs that recovery was possible, even after such a harrowing experience. The community's response remained a powerful force. Local businesses displayed messages of support, neighbors checked in regularly, and the broader town organized initiatives to raise awareness about safety, abduction prevention, and community vigilance. The incident, while traumatic, had united Asheville in a unique way, through shared concern, collective action, and the determination to ensure that such a disappearance could not happen again unnoticed. Meanwhile, Aaron's interactions with investigators became increasingly strained. He alternated between denial and partial admissions, his attempts to manipulate the narrative meeting the unyielding scrutiny of Ward and Dorsey. Every statement, every pause, every defensive reaction was logged, analyzed, and cross-referenced with physical evidence. The meticulous work of documentation ensured that the prosecution's case would be fortified against any attempt at deception or obfuscation. In the following weeks, additional evidence surfaced that deepened the understanding of the abduction. Surveillance from neighboring towns, initially dismissed as irrelevant, revealed vehicle movements consistent with Aaron's pattern of behavior. Financial records, phone logs, and personal correspondence further corroborated the timeline and movements reconstructed by investigators. The narrative of abduction and captivity became increasingly concrete, leaving little room for doubt in the minds of those preparing for trial. For the Sinclair family, the days were a mixture of relief, anxiety, and cautious optimism. They continued to support Elena's recovery, maintain contact with law enforcement, and engage with community efforts to promote safety and awareness. Each day brought incremental progress, small moments of joy, shared meals, laughter returning to their home, yet the shadow of what had occurred remained. Ward reminded them that while Alina had been recovered, the journey toward justice was ongoing, requiring patience, vigilance, and careful navigation of the legal process. As the court date approached, Ward and Dorsey reviewed every aspect of the case. Exhibits were organized, witness statements finalized, and the narrative of the abduction reconstructed in detail. The town of Asheville followed closely, aware that the trial would be both a reckoning and a closure for the months of fear, uncertainty, and anxiety that had gripped their community. Aaron Clemens faced mounting pressure as the evidence accumulated. Each item documented, each fiber analyzed, each eyewitness testimony presented reinforced the inescapable conclusion. The abduction had been deliberate, the confinement sustained, and the manipulation intentional. His attempts to challenge the case were met with meticulous preparation and unwavering attention to detail by the prosecution team. The legal strategy focused not only on the physical evidence, but also on the psychological impact on Alina. Expert testimony highlighted the trauma endured, the methods of control imposed by the abductor, and the resilience demonstrated by the victim in surviving weeks of captivity. The combination of tangible forensic proof and human experience created a compelling, emotionally resonant case that left little room for doubt. Ward reflected on the journey thus far. From the initial disappearance, the months of uncertainty, the painstaking collection of evidence, and finally the recovery of Alina, every step had demanded persistence, intuition, and unwavering dedication. The culmination of these efforts, a comprehensive, airtight case, was now in the hands of the legal system, ready to ensure that justice would be served. In the broader community, life began to regain a semblance of normalcy. Asheville's residents returned to their routines, tempered by an awareness of the fragility of safety and the importance of vigilance. The Sinclair family, while forever changed, embraced each day with gratitude for Alina's survival and determination to support her in reclaiming her life. The investigation had tightened, the evidence was clear, and the path toward justice was laid. Aaron Clemens faced not only the consequences of his actions, but also the scrutiny of a town determined to see accountability fulfilled. And for Detective Ward, the culmination of meticulous planning, forensic expertise, and community cooperation had brought the case to the brink of resolution. Alina Sinclair had returned to the light. The shadow of her abduction remained, but it was now met with the unyielding force of justice, resilience, and the determined pursuit of truth. The morning of the trial arrived with a tense stillness that seemed to settle over Asheville like a heavy fog. Courtroom corridors were filled with whispers, cameras clicked and focused, and the collective anticipation of a town weighed on every surface. Alina Sinclair had returned to her family. Yes, but the process of holding Aaron Clemens accountable was about to begin in a public legal arena, where every detail would be dissected, every word scrutinized, and every gesture analyzed. Detective Lena Ward arrived early, reviewing her notes and evidence packets once more, ensuring that every fiber, every swab, and every witness statement was organized and accessible. She knew that this trial was more than a legal proceeding. It was a public reckoning, an opportunity to affirm the painstaking work of months and the resilience of a young woman who had endured weeks of captivity. In the courtroom, the atmosphere was electric, yet restrained. Family members of Alina, friends, and curious citizens filled the seats, their faces a mixture of hope, anxiety, and the weight of witnessing justice unfold. Across the room, Aaron Clemens sat rigidly, his hands folded, eyes darting occasionally to the jury, the judge, and finally, to Alina herself. He was no longer the defiant figure who had eluded capture. The reality of the case, the overwhelming evidence, and the emotional impact of the community had already begun to wear on him. The prosecution began by establishing the narrative of events. Alina's disappearance during the Riverside fireworks, the days of uncertainty, the initial investigative steps, and ultimately, the forensic and eyewitness breakthroughs that led to her rescue. Ward provided testimony, calmly recounting the discovery of fibers, the hidden compartment behind the shed, and the meticulous reconstruction of Aaron's movements. Each word was precise, each detail deliberate, reinforcing the timeline that tied the suspect to the crime. Alina's turn to testify was both anticipated and nerve-wracking for the court. With careful preparation and the support of her family and legal advocates, she recounted her ordeal with clarity and courage. She spoke of the fear that had gripped her, the isolation of the hidden space, and the psychological control imposed by her captor. Her testimony was not just a factual recounting. It was a vivid, emotional portrait of survival, detailing both the terror she had experienced and the moments of quiet resilience that had carried her through. Each statement Elena made was punctuated by subtle reactions from the jury. Some leaned forward, riveted. Others exchanged glances that betrayed disbelief at the calculated cruelty she had endured. Even the judge, experienced in the mechanics of law, appeared visibly moved by the testimony of a young woman who had endured the unimaginable and emerged with the courage to speak. The defense attempted to challenge Elena's narrative, questioning timelines, interpretations of events, and the accuracy of her recollections under duress. But the prosecution's preparation was meticulous. Cross-references with forensic evidence, DNA samples, fibers, vehicle tracking, and eyewitness accounts created a web that consistently supported Elena's story. The defense's attempts to create doubt were met with clear, logical, and precise responses from Ward, Dorsey, and the legal team. Outside the courtroom, the town of Asheville followed the proceedings closely. Media outlets provided careful coverage, emphasizing the significance of the trial while respecting the sensitivity of the case. Community members organized support networks, offering both public and private messages of encouragement to Elena and her family. The sense of shared vigilance and collective relief that had accompanied her rescue now extended to a communal hope for justice. As the trial progressed, other witnesses were called to the stand. Neighbors who had observed Aaron's truck movements described in detail the unusual behavior in the days following the disappearance. Forensic experts explained the collection, preservation, and analysis of fibers and biological evidence. Each testimony added depth and texture to the narrative, weaving together a story that was both scientifically robust and emotionally compelling. Ward observed carefully from the prosecution table, noting subtle reactions from the jury. Their attention was rapt, their engagement palpable. Each piece of evidence, each eyewitness account, and each expert statement seemed to reinforce the story of abduction, control, and confinement, leaving little room for ambiguity. Aaron's demeanor shifted over the course of the trial. Initially calm, even smug, he became increasingly defensive, occasionally muttering under his breath, his eyes darting anxiously toward the jury. Every cross-examination chipped away at the carefully constructed image he had maintained, revealing inconsistencies and, ultimately, the weight of irrefutable evidence. The emotional intensity of the trial was heightened by the presence of Elena's family. Marjorie and Caleb sat close, hands intertwined, their faces a mixture of fear, hope, and determination. They witnessed each testimony, absorbed each detail, and provided silent but powerful support to Elena, reinforcing her strength and courage. The courtroom became not just a site of legal accountability, but a space where human resilience and the pursuit of justice intersected. One particularly harrowing moment came when the prosecutor asked Elena to describe the hidden compartment where she had been held. Her voice trembled slightly as she detailed the confined space, the sounds that had echoed around her, and the methods by which Aaron had maintained control. The room was silent, each listener acutely aware of the magnitude of what she had endured. It was a moment of stark human truth, bringing the abstract details of evidence into visceral, tangible reality. Forensic demonstrations further illustrated the meticulous nature of the investigation. Ward and her team presented fibers, DNA swabs, and photographs of the hidden compartment, juxtaposing physical evidence with Elena's testimony. Each visual element reinforced the narrative, providing the jury with concrete proof that corroborated the emotional and factual accounts being presented. Outside the immediate courtroom proceedings, the town continued to process the implications of the trial. Asheville had been forever altered by the abduction and the months of uncertainty surrounding Elena's disappearance. Community initiatives, safety programs, and public discussions reflected a heightened awareness and a renewed commitment to vigilance. The trial itself became a catalyst for reflection, ensuring that the events surrounding the abduction were not only addressed legally, but also socially. As the trial progressed into its final days, closing arguments crystallized the case. The prosecution emphasized the deliberate, calculated nature of Aaron's actions, the physical and psychological evidence supporting the abduction, and Elena's compelling, consistent testimony. The defense attempted to create reasonable doubt, focusing on technicalities and minor inconsistencies, but the weight of evidence was formidable. Ward sat quietly as the jury retired to deliberate, knowing that months of investigation, the rescue operation, and careful documentation had all led to this moment. The anticipation was almost unbearable, not just for the family but for the entire town that had followed the story. Every day that had been spent searching, questioning, and analyzing had built toward this final, decisive stage. When the jury returned, the room fell silent. The foreperson stood, the weight of responsibility evident in every movement. The words that followed carried both relief and the heavy acknowledgement of justice fulfilled. Guilty on all counts. Aaron Clemens would face the consequences of his actions, accountable not only for the abduction, but for the profound disruption and trauma he had inflicted. The reaction was immediate and profound. Marjorie Sinclair wept openly, clutching her daughter, while Caleb hugged his sister tightly, a mixture of joy and lingering tension palpable. Ward observed with quiet satisfaction, aware that the meticulous work of investigation, rescue, and legal preparation had culminated in a resolution that honored both the truth and the resilience of the victim. In the days following the verdict, the community continued to process the events. Asheville had endured fear, uncertainty, and anxiety, but now faced a future tempered by the knowledge that justice had been served. Community members reflected on the importance of vigilance, the strength of collective action, and the resilience of those who had endured trauma. For Alina, the trial marked not just an end, but a beginning. With the legal proceedings concluded, she could focus on recovery, reclaiming autonomy, and rebuilding a sense of normalcy. The support of her family, the expertise of counselors, and the care of medical professionals provided a foundation for healing. Each day brought incremental progress, from simple routines to reintegration into community life, each step a testament to her resilience and courage. Ward, reflecting on the trial's conclusion, understood the broader implications. Investigation and justice were not isolated processes, they were deeply intertwined with community, resilience, and the human capacity to endure and reclaim life after trauma. The meticulous documentation, the careful planning of the rescue, and the unwavering pursuit of truth had not only secured accountability, but had reinforced the moral and ethical framework within which law enforcement operated. The case of Elena Sinclair would remain a defining moment in Asheville's history. It was a story of disappearance, fear, meticulous investigation, rescue, and ultimately, justice. It highlighted the fragility of safety, the importance of vigilance, and the enduring strength of human resilience. And as Elena reclaimed her life, her story became both a cautionary tale and a testament to the power of determination, courage, and the collective pursuit of truth. The courtroom had emptied, the gavel fallen into silence, but the story of Elena Sinclair did not end there. In the weeks and months following the verdict, the town of Asheville slowly began to breathe again, though the shadow of her abduction lingered in quiet corners and whispered memories. For Elena, the return to normalcy was not immediate. The relief of rescue and the satisfaction of justice were only the first steps in a journey toward healing, a process that demanded patience, courage, and an unwavering support system. Marjorie Sinclair dedicated herself to rebuilding a life that had been disrupted in ways no one could have anticipated. Every day began with small, deliberate rituals: breakfast with Elena, walks through familiar streets, returning to spaces that had once been ordinary but now felt precious. The simple act of walking down the main avenue of town, past shops she had known since childhood, became a triumph, a reclaiming of a world she had been forced to leave behind. Caleb, her younger brother, assumed a quiet but vital role in the process. Protective, attentive, and at times anxious, he ensured that Elena never felt alone, guiding her back into routines, encouraging laughter, and offering a steadfast presence. Together, mother and children navigated the delicate balance of recovery, acknowledging trauma while embracing the slowly returning joys of daily life. Therapy sessions became central to Elena's emotional recovery. Specialists skilled in trauma and prolonged captivity guided her through the intricacies of processing fear, rebuilding trust, and confronting memories that were vivid, sometimes overwhelming, and always persistent. In the safe space of counseling, she could speak freely about the hours in confinement, the isolation, and the subtle manipulations that had kept her captive. These sessions were emotionally exhausting, but each one became a brick in the foundation of her healing. The town of Asheville played an unanticipated role in this process. Community members who had followed the story with anxiety and hope offered gestures of support, flowers, meals, notes of encouragement. Local businesses displayed quiet signs of solidarity, and school programs addressed safety and awareness. The collective consciousness of the town had shifted. Fear had not disappeared, but vigilance had transformed into a shared commitment to ensuring that no one else would endure what Elena had survived. Ward and her team remained in contact with the family, offering both procedural updates and emotional support. The meticulous work of investigation had culminated in conviction, but Ward understood that the human elements, trust, security, and the reclaiming of autonomy were equally vital. She coordinated with counselors, medical professionals, and legal advocates to ensure that every step forward was deliberate and supportive. In private moments, Elena began to explore the activities that had once defined her before the abduction. Photography, her lifelong passion, became a tool not only for creative expression, but also for therapy. She captured images of light and shadow, of familiar streets and the changing seasons, transforming them into visual narratives that helped process her experience. Each photograph was both a memory and a reclamation, a statement that she could define her own perspective, no longer limited by fear or confinement. Education resumed as well. Returning to school was initially daunting, the fear of public attention, whispers and reminders of the incident pressing heavily. Yet with time, understanding teachers, supportive peers, and a cautious reintroduction allowed Elena to re-engage academically. Each successful day was a victory, each interaction a reaffirmation that she could move forward without erasing the past, but learning to integrate it into a broader, stronger sense of self. Marjorie and Caleb navigated their own transformations. The months of uncertainty had left deep imprints, anxiety, vigilance, and a new awareness of fragility. But they also revealed resilience, resourcefulness, and a capacity for profound care. Family routines, once disrupted, gradually reasserted themselves. Meals shared without fear, evenings spent in quiet conversation, walks to the riverside that had once been the backdrop of terror. Every ordinary moment was now layered with gratitude, awareness, and a deeper appreciation for the fragility and value of life. The legal aftermath of the trial also reverberated through the community. Aaron Clemens' conviction brought closure, but it also prompted reflection on the mechanisms that had allowed the abduction to occur. Local leaders, law enforcement officials, and civic groups initiated discussions on safety protocols, surveillance, and community engagement. Programs designed to educate young people on personal safety, stranger danger, and digital awareness were implemented, aiming to prevent future incidents. The incident, while traumatic, catalyzed systemic reflection and action, reinforcing both vigilance and community solidarity. Media coverage in the months following the trial focused on both justice and recovery. Stories highlighted Elena's resilience, the bravery of the investigative team, and the supportive role of the community. Interviews with Ward and Dorsey emphasized procedural diligence, the evolution of forensic techniques, and the importance of persistent investigation in resolving abductions. The narrative emphasized recovery, healing, and hope, offering a counterbalance to the initial fear and suspense that had gripped Asheville. Elena's own voice began to emerge in these narratives, carefully curated with guidance from her family and counselors. Public appearances, when she chose them, were measured and controlled, emphasizing awareness and advocacy rather than sensationalism. She spoke about resilience, the importance of listening to instincts, and the value of community vigilance. Her story, once defined by abduction, gradually became one of empowerment, insight, and personal strength. The Sinclair family also engaged in advocacy, using their
experience to foster awareness about abduction, safety, and the resources available for recovery. Community workshops, school talks, and support groups became avenues to channel trauma into constructive action. The process reinforced both healing and purpose, transforming personal suffering into a platform for education and prevention. Ward reflected on the investigation and trial with quiet satisfaction. The meticulous work, from tracing fibers to reconstructing timelines, from coordinated rescue operations to courtroom testimony, had ensured justice was served. But beyond the procedural success, the human element remained central. Elena's recovery, the family's reclamation of safety, and the broader community's renewed awareness formed the true measure of achievement. In private moments, Elena revisited the riverside, where the fireworks had once marked the night of her disappearance. The familiar sounds of rushing water, rustling leaves, and distant laughter had once been interwoven with fear. Now they were symbols of endurance, places of reflection and renewal. She walked along the shore slowly, absorbing the environment with intentionality, reconnecting with a landscape that had been both terrifying and comforting in its constancy. Over time, public recognition of the case evolved from sensational headlines to narratives of resilience and justice. Documentaries, news segments, and community discussions highlighted not just the crime, but also the procedural diligence, the role of community support, and the emotional strength required to navigate both abduction and recovery. Elena's story became an educational touchstone, a cautionary tale, balanced with a powerful example of human resilience. The psychological impact of recovery remained complex. Elena experienced moments of anxiety, flashbacks, and residual fear, particularly in spaces reminiscent of her captivity. Therapy, community support, and the presence of her family allowed her to navigate these moments, gradually building strategies to cope, contextualize, and integrate them into her broader life narrative. Each success, no matter how small, reinforced the possibility of moving forward without being defined solely by trauma. Marjorie Sinclair, reflecting on the months of abduction and recovery, recognized a transformation in both herself and her children. The experience had demanded extraordinary vigilance, resilience, and courage, and while the memory of fear remained, it was tempered by pride in Elena's recovery and a profound sense of gratitude for the community and law enforcement efforts that had ensured her daughter's safe return. Caleb, too, carried the experience with him, integrating lessons of empathy, vigilance, and resilience into his understanding of the world. The incident had reshaped his perception of safety, responsibility, and family, instilling an awareness that would influence his decisions, relationships, and personal growth for years to come. The town of Asheville continued to evolve in response to the case. Community safety initiatives were strengthened, youth awareness programs implemented, and law enforcement engagement with local residents increased. The abduction and recovery of Elena Sinclair became a reference point, a story that reminded the town of the fragility of safety, the importance of vigilance, and the power of collective action. As time passed, Elena began to reclaim milestones interrupted by her abduction: social gatherings, school events, creative projects, and family celebrations. Each milestone was approached with caution, gratitude, and renewed appreciation for the ordinary moments of life that had once been taken for granted. These moments, while simple, became powerful affirmations of survival, agency, and hope. Ward, observing from a professional distance, recognized the profound significance of this phase. The resolution of the legal case, the meticulous reconstruction of events, and the pursuit of justice had achieved tangible results. But the ongoing process of healing was equally critical. Elena's story exemplified the intersection of criminal justice, human resilience, and community engagement, offering a comprehensive lesson in the multidimensional nature of recovery. The Sinclair family, strengthened by their experience, embraced advocacy, awareness, and support for others affected by abduction or trauma. Their engagement transformed private suffering into public service, offering guidance, hope, and solidarity to others navigating similar crises. Elena's journey of healing became a model for both personal resilience and community response. The threads of fear, uncertainty, and trauma were interwoven with courage, hope, and the unwavering support of family and community. The landscape of Asheville, once shadowed by anxiety, was now illuminated by awareness, vigilance, and the enduring message that survival and recovery were possible, even in the aftermath of profound disruption.
Years would pass, and yet the story of Elena Sinclair would remain etched into the memory of Asheville, not as a tale of fear alone, but as a narrative of resilience, community, and the enduring pursuit of justice. The events that had unfolded in those fateful weeks, from the fireworks night to the trial, had changed everyone involved: the Sinclair family, law enforcement, the legal system, and even the town itself. The abduction, terrifying as it had been, had created a ripple effect that would define their lives, shaping how they navigated trust, safety, and human connection. For Elena, the immediate aftermath of a recovery and trial eventually gave way to reflection and empowerment. She began to see her experience not just as a period of fear, but as a defining moment in her life, a challenge she had endured and overcome. The trauma remained, shadowing certain spaces and moments, but with time and deliberate effort, she learned to reclaim control over her narrative. Therapy, family support, and her own creative pursuits became tools for reclaiming agency, enabling her to rebuild a life grounded in safety, self-determination, and purpose. Photography, once a simple hobby, evolved into a powerful medium of expression. Elena captured moments of light and shadow, familiar streets, and landscapes that had been sites of both fear and resilience. Her images became a visual diary of healing, an assertion that she was no longer defined solely by abduction, but by the breadth of her own life and vision. These creative explorations not only supported her recovery, but also became a way to communicate, subtly and profoundly, the complexity of surviving trauma and the possibilities of moving forward. The Sinclair family continued to evolve in response to the experience. Marjorie, having navigated months of unimaginable fear and anxiety, emerged with a strengthened sense of purpose. She became an advocate for safety awareness, connecting with schools, local organizations, and families to ensure that other young people would be protected. Her advocacy extended beyond simple cautionary tales. She shared strategies for vigilance, the importance of community connection, and the value of trusting instincts. Caleb, whose protective instincts had been heightened during Elena's disappearance, matured into a young man with a keen understanding of responsibility, empathy, and vigilance. He carried the lessons of those months with him, integrating awareness and caution into his life, while simultaneously nurturing bonds of trust and care within his family and community. The Sinclair household, though forever marked by trauma, became a place of strength, dialogue, and resilience, a testament to the enduring bonds that had weathered fear and uncertainty. Asheville itself bore witness to transformation. The abduction and rescue of a well-known local girl had created a community-wide reckoning, prompting conversations about safety, trust, and collective responsibility. Public safety programs were strengthened, youth education initiatives were implemented, and law enforcement engaged in proactive strategies to prevent similar events. The city had learned to balance vigilance with everyday life, to navigate the delicate tension between fear and trust, and to foster a sense of unity in the face of adversity. Ward and Dorsey, who had worked tirelessly to ensure that justice was served, reflected on the broader implications of the case. Their meticulous work, from evidence collection to investigative persistence, had not only secured conviction, but had illuminated the multifaceted nature of abduction cases. It was a reminder that criminal investigations were not solely about apprehending suspects. They were about rebuilding lives, restoring safety, and reinforcing the principles of accountability and justice. Public memory of the case evolved over time. Media coverage, initially focused on the suspense and terror of abduction, gradually shifted to highlight recovery, resilience, and empowerment. Documentaries, news stories, and community programs emphasized not only the severity of the crime, but also the meticulous investigative work, the courage of the victim, and the supportive response of the community. Elena's story became a reference point, a narrative that balanced fear with hope, vulnerability with resilience, and trauma with the power of recovery. Elena herself became an advocate, using her experience to raise awareness and empower others. Carefully curated appearances, educational talks, and creative projects allowed her to communicate lessons of caution, resilience, and agency without sensationalizing her trauma. She spoke about trust, awareness, and the importance of listening to one's instincts, offering guidance to young people navigating environments where danger might be hidden in ordinary spaces. Her voice became both personal and universal, a reminder that survival was possible and that recovery, though challenging, could lead to empowerment. The legal closure provided by Erin Clemens' conviction was significant, but the true legacy extended beyond the courtroom. Justice had been served in a formal sense, but the deeper impact was social, emotional, and communal. The case reinforced the importance of diligent investigation, community awareness, and personal resilience. It demonstrated how a collective response, the coordination of law enforcement, family, and community, could transform trauma into accountability and protection. In private moments, Elena reflected on her journey with profound clarity. She understood the fragility of life, the volatility of human behavior, and the resilience that could emerge in extreme circumstances. Her recovery was ongoing, a process that required continued attention, reflection, and self-compassion. Each day became an opportunity to reclaim spaces, moments, and relationships that had once been threatened, and to build a future defined not by fear, but by choice, courage, and agency. Marjorie Sinclair often described the family's evolution as a shift from fear to empowerment. The experience had demanded extraordinary vigilance and courage, but it had also revealed capacities for strength, resilience, and advocacy that might have remained dormant otherwise. She emphasized that while trauma leaves lasting marks, the deliberate cultivation of support, awareness, and purpose can transform suffering into a platform for growth and positive action. The community continued to benefit from the lessons learned. Youth programs, safety awareness campaigns, and neighborhood engagement initiatives fostered a culture of vigilance balanced with empathy. Asheville's residents, having experienced both fear and relief, developed a collective understanding of the importance of community oversight, the value of reporting concerns, and the transformative power of collective action. Elena's creative pursuits, particularly her photography, became more than personal therapy. They evolved into a form of storytelling that communicated both struggle and resilience. Exhibitions, online portfolios, and public talks allowed her to share her perspective, transforming private experiences into universal narratives that resonated with audiences far beyond Asheville. Each image, carefully composed, reflected the interplay of shadow and light, fear and recovery, trauma and empowerment, a visual representation of a life reclaimed. Ward, reflecting on the years following the case, recognized that success in law enforcement extended beyond convictions. It was measured by the restoration of safety, the support of survivors, and the reinforcement of societal trust. The Sinclair case exemplified the profound responsibilities of investigative work, demonstrating how persistence, careful documentation, and community cooperation could yield results that were both legally sound and emotionally meaningful. As time passed, Elena revisited places that had once held terror. The riverside, the streets of Asheville, and familiar neighborhoods became sites of reflection, reassurance, and eventual comfort. She walked with intention, slowly reasserting her presence in the world, reclaiming spaces that had once been dominated by fear. Each step was an assertion of agency, a reminder that survival was not passive, and that healing required deliberate engagement with the environment. Public recognition of the case evolved into a narrative of empowerment. Documentaries, interviews, and educational programs highlighted Elena's resilience, the investigative diligence of law enforcement, and the supportive role of the community. These narratives emphasized the capacity for recovery, the importance of vigilance, and the moral responsibility of society to protect and support those who have experienced trauma. For the Sinclair family, the journey remained ongoing, but imbued with hope. The experience had forged stronger bonds, revealed latent capacities for advocacy, and instilled a profound appreciation for ordinary moments of life. Each shared meal, each walk, and each quiet evening was a reminder that survival and resilience were possible, and that the human spirit could endure and thrive even after profound disruption. The story of Elena Sinclair became a permanent part of Asheville's collective memory, not as a tale of terror alone, but as a testament to human courage, meticulous justice, and community solidarity. It reminded everyone that even in moments of extreme fear, resilience, recovery, and justice were attainable. Ultimately, the legacy of the case lay in the convergence of truth, accountability, and human resilience. Elena Sinclair had endured fear, isolation, and trauma, but she had emerged with agency, voice, and the capacity to transform her experience into empowerment. Her family had navigated fear and uncertainty to support her recovery and advocate for broader safety awareness. The community had responded with vigilance, compassion, and collective action. And law enforcement, through careful, meticulous work, had ensured that justice was not merely a concept, but a tangible reality. As Asheville continued to move forward, the lessons of Elena Sinclair's story remained embedded in its fabric. The case became a reference point for vigilance, a reminder of the fragility and value of safety, and an example of how courage, persistence, and support could overcome even the darkest circumstances. And for Elena herself, each day was a step forward, a reaffirmation that the human spirit could endure, recover, and ultimately thrive. Her story, once defined by disappearance and fear, had been reclaimed. It now existed as a narrative of survival, justice, and reflection, a cinematic testament to resilience, community, and the enduring pursuit of truth. The shadows of abduction had given way to the light of recovery, and the final chapter, though marked by memory, was defined by empowerment, agency, and the unshakable human capacity to endure and rebuild.